Bishops are starting to shut down traditional Latin masses at dioceses across the country. How should priests and laity respond to these actions? That's what we're going to talk about today on Crisis Point. Hello, I'm Eric Sammons, your host and editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine. Before I get started, I just want to remind people to smash that like button and subscribe, but don't notify. Also, follow us on social media at Crisis Mag at all the various locations. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into it here. So like I said, traditional Latin masses are being shut down across the country and probably elsewhere outside the United States as well. Now, before I really talk about this, I want to make an appeal that this is not intended to be just a discussion for people who attend the traditional Latin Mass. This is directed towards all Catholics because I believe it truly does impact all Catholics. And I have something coming out later today at Crisis about this. But the attack on the traditional Latin Mass, the desire to suppress the traditional Latin Mass, is one part of an overall strategy against what the Pope perceives as traditionalism. And a recent quote by him attacking traditionalism, he said in the context of somebody asking if Humanae Vitae could be overturned, if contraception, artificial contraception, could be made moral. He basically didn't answer the question. He said dogma. He said that these teachings doctrine can develop, and that we can't fall into traditionalism. So my point of this is that the desire to shut down the traditional Latin Mass affects all Catholics. Even if you only attend the ordinary form, you've never been to traditional Latin Mass, you don't really care about the traditional Latin Mass. I do think these things matter because how we respond to this will form how we respond to other attempts to change fundamental things about the church. And also, it will impact how your Novus Ordo Mass is celebrated. We've already seen there's examples where bishops who have shut down or restricted the traditional Latin Mass have also told all priests, you can't celebrate the Novus Ordo ad orientem, you can't say it in Latin. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they say you can't have an altar rail, you can't give communion on the tongue. And there's a lot of different things like that could be down the road. I don't think that it's crazy to think that. So let me just give first an update of what's going on. So, of course, as most people know, a year ago, July of 2021, the Pope issued a motu proprio called Traditionis Custodes. And in it, he basically said that he would like to see there just be one form, one unique expression, as he said, of the Roman Rite. And he meant the Novus Ordo, also called the ordinary form, called the Mass of St. Paul the Sixth. I mean, there's lots of different names for it. I kind of feel like the ordinary form and extraordinary form language he wanted to get rid of, so I don't really use that too much anymore. But basically, what Francis was saying is he would like to move towards a time where there is no traditional Latin Mass being celebrated in the Roman Catholic Church. And he saw it as, he explained that this was part of a movement that to resist what he felt were traditionalist viewpoints in the church that were critical or maybe even rejected Vatican II and things of that nature. So he asked bishops to restrict the traditional Latin Mass in their diocese. And he said it goes into effect immediately. Now, the problem is that most bishops did not act in the way I think he wanted them to. Most bishops did not do anything, or they did very little. Even bishops that are Francis bishops, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, people like Cardinal Supich, Cardinal Gregory, they didn't really do much either. They said they're going to explore it and wait and see. And so for the next year, yes, there were some dioceses where the Latin Mass was restricted more than others. In most places, though, nothing really happened. However, this month, particularly in the last month, we've seen a lot of bishops now move. And I don't know if that was intended to be a year to wait, if this was coordinated, if the Vatican started pushing them. I don't know. That's only speculation. But we know that in various dioceses, things have started to come down. So, for example, in the Archdiocese of Chicago, Cardinal Supich, he basically said that that you have to say the Novus Ordo has to be said on the first Sunday of the month. You can't say the traditional Latin Mass. Also couldn't be said, I think, at Easter and Christmas and things like that. But most recently, what happened was the Institute of Christ the King, which is a religious order that celebrates only the Latin Mass. They're very similar to the Fraternity of St. Peter. They have a in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And there were rumors that Supich said you have to sign off on various things in order to continue to be here in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And they refused to sign it. And as of August 1st, though, their parish has been shut down. The Institute's parish in the Archdiocese of Chicago has been shut down. There are no masses being said, no confessions being heard. Basically, their faculties, it seems, were taken. I say it seems because while we know that the parish is shut down, we haven't actually heard why or exactly what happened. But the assumption is that Cardinal Supich just told them simply, your faculties are suspended. You cannot celebrate the sacraments here in this diocese. And so they're not. In Washington, D.C., Cardinal Gregory announced that the Latin Mass would only be celebrated at 3 locations, and none of them are parishes, in the Archdiocese of Washington. Now, before that, there were a number of places where the traditional Latin Mass was celebrated. One of the most well-known is St. Mary, Mother of God in downtown D.C. That's where I first attended the Latin Mass myself, which was a great parish. It celebrated both the ordinary form and the extraordinary form, both the Novus Ordo and the traditional Latin Mass. But the traditional Latin Mass is being shut down as of, I think it's September 8th. Also, St. Francis de Sales in downtown D.C. had a traditional Latin Mass. Again, it was also a parish church that had the Novus Ordo as well. That is no longer going to be allowed. And so essentially, Cardinal Gregory shut down the traditional Latin Mass at most parishes. It's now only a few places. A week later, right across the river in Arlington, Virginia, where there are probably more traditional Latin Masses regularly said there in parish churches than anywhere else in the country, maybe even the world for all I know. I think it was 21 different locations. Now it would only be said at 8 different locations. And in 5 of those cases, it would not be at a church. It would be in a gym or a chapel or something like that. I think I remember reading that in Front Royal, Virginia, they typically have 300 or 400 people attend a traditional Latin Mass at the parish. Now they have to have it at a chapel that seats 80. And I think they're only allowed to have 1 on Sunday. So clearly it's an effort to move towards not having the traditional Latin Mass, or having it very, very restricted. Even though lots of people want to go to it, that's not really a consideration here. We got to shut this down. And also Savannah is another example. Savannah, Georgia, I had an article about this at Crisis last week, where essentially the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass is only going to be allowed in a few places until next May, and then it's going to be completely eliminated. So you will not be able to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass at all in Savannah, Diocese of Savannah, Georgia, as of next May 23rd, I believe it is. And so these are just some examples, the biggest examples that have come down the pike. And most people think, and I think they're probably right to think, that more are going to be coming, that this is just the beginning. I mean, let's be honest. This is not a conspiracy theory. Pope Francis himself said he wants to move to the point where the traditional Latin Mass is no longer celebrated in the church, that the Novus Ordo is a unique expression, meaning the only expression of the Roman Rite. And so he wants to move towards this. And so now we see it happening definitely at the diocesan level. And so before I talk about what we should do in response, I just want to make sure we take a step back and realize how crazy this is. That in today's Catholic Church, 2022, in which we have just Catholics leaving left and right, the numbers are terrible. Infant baptisms are way down. Mass attendance is down. We have so many people leaving the church. We have so little influence in the world. We so many problems that the Pope has decided this is really the problem that he needs to spend most of it. It seems like most of his energy on. I mean, he brings up problems with traditionalism all the time. We see these bishops who are working to shut down the only parishes that are growing in their diocese. I mean, this is literally true. The only parishes that are growing in their diocese, they're shutting them down or making it very difficult for them to continue. So let's just remember how crazy this is, that we have heresy and abuse running rampant in Novus Ordo parishes. But the problem is the thing that bishops are going to spend their time on is shutting down traditional Latin Mass. And the fact that a lot of bishops have not done this tells you that they think the same thing. They think it's crazy too. They might not be fans of traditional Latin Mass. They might not even care that much about it, but they do know that this is a parish. These are the parishes where things are happening, where people are more people are going to RCIA. People are donating. The faith is thriving. People believe what the church teaches at these parishes. And so the fact that these are the ones being shut down is insane. Okay, so, but we could go on forever about that. What should Catholics do in response? This is a big deal. This affects people in a very personal and direct way. I mean, we see this when parishes are shut down because of they no longer can support themselves. When dioceses have to trim the fat, and they basically realize that they have too many parishes for the number of Catholics they have. Catholics get very upset, and understandably. This is the parish you may have grown up in. This is a parish maybe where you really, each Sunday, you really grow closer to Christ. It's a big deal. And so when that happens, it might be justifiable because the parish just can't sustain itself. The same is true when you are a member of a parish that is growing and thriving, and it's really helping your faith. It's helping you draw closer to Jesus Christ. You're bringing more people into that relationship with Jesus Christ. All these things are happening. For the bishop to basically say you're being shut down, it's very difficult. I can just imagine how I would feel if it happened to me. And I think we need to recognize how painful this is. In fact, that's what gets me probably the most angry when I see like Cardinal Gregory talk about how much he cares about the people who attend these masses. He does not care. If he cared, he would not do this. He is not being a shepherd. He is, frankly, I said this on Twitter and I don't back down from him. He's wicked. He's a wicked, wicked man for what he's doing. And so is Cardinal Supich. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. And so we have to be charitable. We have to be empathetic to those who are having their parish shut down for no good reason. But what should we do? Now, I will say it's very easy for the Twitter warriors to talk big, to say, okay, we have to storm the churches. We have to block the doors. We have to say the masses anyway. We have to do all these things. We have to just basically reject what they're saying and do what we're doing anyway. That's easy to say, but it's a lot more complicated. This is not an easy question to ask. What should we do in response? And I don't think we should. I think we need to be prudent, but I also think we need to think it out. That doesn't mean we can't we might not have to be called to do some radical things, but I just think we have to recognize how difficult this is for each individual person. For the person who's attending this type of mass that gets shut down, their options may be very limited, and they might be facing a real crisis of conscience about what to do. Let's not be so quick to condemn them if they decide to do something we don't want them to do. So the first thing is that we need to do, and I don't care how cliched it sounds, I don't care if I've said it before over and over again, we need to be in prayer and fasting. We need to be engaged in prayer and fasting. We just have to do this, because any response we do that does not include prayer and fasting, I guarantee is the wrong thing to do. I guarantee it's not going to work. It's not a good idea to do. So we have to have prayer and fasting underneath all of this. We also have to recognize that there are different situations happening here. A lot of people don't understand that how parishes are set up can be very different. So, for example, you could have a diocesan priest in a diocesan parish. Meaning a diocesan priest, meaning he reports directly to the bishop, and that's his superior, and he's working in a diocesan parish that's completely controlled and owned by the diocesan bishop. That's the most common type. But that's not the only type. You also have a situation where you have religious priests at a diocesan parish. This is the case where you have priests who are members of a religious order, for example, like the Institute of Christ the King or the FSSP or something like that. But the parish itself, the church, is owned by the diocese. It's the diocesan parish, and there are religious who are basically working there. Your third option is you have religious priests, a religiously owned parish, where the parish itself, the church building and whatnot, is owned not by the diocese, but by the religious order. My understanding is that the parish that the Institute of Christ the King in Chicago is owned by the Institute. And so that would be the case in this situation. And so those are different situations. What can be done? Now, I just want to note that it's not a solution. Some people think this, it's a solution to own the building. If the bishop doesn't own it, if the diocese doesn't own it, that somehow is a solution. That's not a solution, because here's a very important Catholic principle we have to remember. The bishop is the legitimate authority of liturgy in his diocese. Now, I'm going to talk about how he can use that authority illegitimately and illegitimately. But my point right now is we have to keep that principle in mind. So even if a religious order owns a building, a church in a diocese, the bishop still has authority over the mass being said, in the liturgies being said in that parish, even though he doesn't own the building. So honestly, owning a parish is not really a big solution that allows you to do whatever you want. The bishop still has that. He is still the regulator of the liturgy in the diocese. But another important principle is that obedience is not absolute. The Catholic teaching on obedience, I've talked about this before. We've written about this at Christ before. Peter Kwasniewski's book on true obedience talks about this. We had an interview on a podcast with him a few months ago. Obedience has never been considered absolute in Catholic teaching. St. Thomas Aquinas talks about this. This is a very important point, that no man, that includes the Pope, bishop, priest, doesn't matter. No man commands absolute obedience over another man in this world. The only person that commands absolute obedience is actually three persons: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God Almighty. He's the only one who commands absolute obedience from us. No man does. And so our obedience to authority does depend upon the order being given, whether or not that authority has the right to give the command or not. And so that is an important principle I've talked about before, so I'm not going to go into it again today. But also, it's important to note that obedience is different depending on whether or not you're a lay person or a religious or a priest. So, for example, a diocesan priest has a certain level of obedience he has to give to his bishop that is different than, for example, me as a lay person have to give to the bishop. If, for example, a bishop tells a priest, I need you to move to this other parish, in general, that priest does have to obey. But a bishop can't tell me I have to go to a different parish. He doesn't have that level of authority over me. And so this is important, and we have to distinguish it when we're talking about how we respond to a traditional Latin masses being shut down. Now, what are the options for lay people? So let's talk about lay people first, not talking about priests, but lay people. What are our options if our traditional Latin mass is shut down? One option is you just simply start going to the Novus Ordo at the parish where you used to go to the traditional Latin mass. Maybe there's another one bet that you like better or something like that. But basically, you just start attending Novus Ordo. It's possible that's your only option. It's possible the traditional Latin mass is being shut down is really your only reasonable option. I mean, I think when Savannah shuts down traditional Latin masses, there may not be any traditional Latin mass within hours. And so the Novus Ordo might be your only option, really. So that's one option. By the way, I'm going through these. I'm not going to say exactly which one's the best, but I'm going to say what the different possibilities are, then talk about that. Another option is to attend, find a TLM somewhere else. Maybe you drive a far distance. Maybe you move. Maybe you no longer live in the diocese where it's being shut down. You move somewhere else in the hope that it won't be shut down there. That's another option. Another option is you go to an Eastern Catholic rite, or you go to the Ordinariate Mass, something that's not the traditional Latin Mass, but it also has a lot of the built-in reverence and theologically rich prayers and language that you find in the traditional Latin Mass. That's another possibility. Another possibility is you go to what could be called an irregular traditional Latin Mass. I'm talking, of course, here mostly about the Society of St. Pius X. And I'm not going to get into a whole debate about whether or not they're regular or irregular. I will say this, that I believe very strongly that the church has made clear that you can attend a Society of St. Pius X Mass and that's not a sin, and you can receive communion there. So I know some don't think that, but be that as may, the Pope has given them faculties. They have faculties. It's a valid mass. So I don't see how you could say it's a sin that you just can't go to a SSPX. I do think there are issues with going to an SSPX because it isn't irregular canonically, but I don't think it's a sin to go there. So the question a lot of Catholics might ask, why not? Why is this even a big debate? Why not just start attending the Novus Ordo like everybody else? And I think that I understand why some Catholics might ask that, but I think it does not really understand how hard it's. Can we take a step back? I understand why it's hard for a Novus Ordo attending Catholic to understand why somebody who attends a traditional Latin Mass would not want to attend the Novus Ordo. It might be because the Novus Ordo locally is terrible. It might be that the options are very limited. In fact, I will say when I moved down to Florida, the area I lived in, I did not feel like any Novus Ordo there met what I thought was a pretty minimum standard time. Remember, I had been going to Novus Ordo my whole Catholic life before this. I wasn't a traditional Latin Mass person. We went down there. I did not think any of the local masses were at a level that I felt I could bring my kids to week in, week out, that it would not harm their faith. I mean, that's just because of the way the liturgy was celebrated. I just didn't think there was option. That's actually why we started attending the traditional Latin Mass regularly, because we felt it wasn't because we were like, okay, we're TLM people. No, it's just because we felt like the basic level of reverence we needed our kids to see week in, week out to keep their faith was only available at the traditional Latin Mass. And so that's why we started attending that. And so that might be a possibility. That might be the situation for people. They just don't feel like they could bring their kids to the local Novus Ordo because they see that it leads to a loss of faith, a faith in the real presence, faith in the church. I mean, 70% of Catholics do not believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. You can't tell me that their weekly involvement in how the Eucharist comes to them doesn't have some impact on that. You can't tell me that 70% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence, and that's simply because we have bad catechesis. No, it's because they see week in, week out how the Eucharist is treated, how the celebration of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass is treated. And so it's very important for them to attend somewhere where they feel like the faith, particularly the faith in the real presence, is being fostered. And they're worried that it's not going to pass on the faith to their kids. I think that's a very legitimate concern. Like I said, that's what led me to traditional Latin Mass, was because the area I lived in at one time did not have any Novus Ordo masses that I felt were at the bare minimum for passing on the faith to my kids. I was worried about them becoming Catholic. And I have a duty as a father for my kids. I cannot shirk that. I cannot just simply say, well, the church allows this, so I'm just going to go ahead and go there. That's not what I have to answer for when I meet my judge, when I die. If my kids fall away from the faith because of my actions, I can't just say, well, the church allowed it. No, the Lord is going to say to me, no, you knew that this would harm your kid's faith, and you did nothing about it. So I do think it's not just so simple as attending the Novus Ordo. Now, what about attending, what about moving to another location where traditional Latin Mass is? I think that's problematic. I mean, I think it might be a good idea, but I think the handwriting's on the wall that this is going to happen everywhere. That the Vatican, I think, and I have sources that are telling me this, that the Vatican's pushing to basically get the traditional Latin Mass completely eliminated in the next couple of years. And so I don't think I would pick up and move just for that, because I think it might not be available wherever you end up going eventually. Attending an Eastern Catholic liturgy, ordinary Mass, is a very valid option, a very good option, and I encourage it and support it. I would just say this, though. Do not go to one of those parishes to try to change it into a traditional Latin Mass parish. The theology at a Eastern Catholic parish, for example, is quite different. Eastern Catholic theology is not the same as Latin Catholic theology. Yes, on the basic dogmas and doctrines of the church, we're in agreement, but just the way that things are looked at are different. So do not be one of these people who start attending a Eastern Catholic liturgy, and you then expect them to all start praying the rosary. I think spirituality is probably the biggest, not theology as much as spirituality, is where things are really different. The rosary is a Latin devotion. It's not really part of the Eastern Catholic heritage. So don't go there and try to change them. Same thing with the ordinariate Mass. If you start going to an ordinariate Mass, don't try to make it into a traditional Latin Mass. They have their own spirituality, their own history, and respect that. So whereas I think they're very, they're very, what's the word? It's a very legitimate option to go there. Just try to be respectful that they have their own history and their own tradition that you have to respect. Now, as far as going to a SSPX society, again, I don't think this is a sinful thing to do. However, I do think it's a legitimate crisis of conscience for people, and we have to respect that. Because of the irregular status of the society, there are many Catholics who really just don't think they can attend a society chapel, at least not regularly. And I think we need to respect that, because the fact of the matter is the society is not, I don't want to say it's not in full communion. It's in full communion. That's wrong language, but it is an irregular situation. And it's enough that it gives people worries in their conscience. And I think I don't think we should just like blow past that and just tell them, well, screw your conscience. You just go anyway. I don't think that's legitimate. But if your conscience is clear about it, you've read about it, you've studied the history of the society, and you believe that the faculties given by the Pope, which haven't been given, are legitimate and everything is hunky-dory, then yes, I think that is an option that lay Catholics can choose. Now, what about options for a priest? What about those who a priest who's celebrating the traditional Latin Mass, like for example, the ones in the Institute, or the ones in DC, and or Savannah, are being told you can't celebrate anymore. There's basically three options here. One is you just obey quietly and hope and pray for the best. You just do what you're told and you just go on. Another option is you obey, but you do make some type of public protest, or at least some protest directly to the bishop and tell him some reason why you think this is wrong. And another option is to disobey. Now, again, when you don't follow an illegitimate order, it's not really disobeying, because it's an illegitimate obedience that's being asked for. So the term disobey might not be the best, but let's just use that. You basically don't follow the order. Now, here's the thing. I know a lot of lay Catholics want our priests to do that. We want them to just simply say, no, we're just going to keep doing it. I saw people thought the Institute was wrong to shut down. They thought they should have just kept on saying masses and just ignored the order of Cardinal Cupich. It's not that easy, people. I know Archbishop Lefebvre did it essentially, but he did it after decades of praying about it and really having a lot of thought that went into it. And I don't think even when he did it, it's not like he rejoiced in doing it. He didn't want to do these things, the things that he did. He felt it was necessary. And I feel like if a priest has not gotten to a point where they have completely reconciled themselves to these actions, that what they're going to be doing could lead to their suspension of their faculties, but also even their excommunication, then they should not even think about doing it. Excommunication is not a joke, people. Yes, I do know people have been excommunicated who were vindicated. St. Joan of Arc is the most obvious example. I personally believe that eventually Archbishop Lefebvre's excommunication, it will be vindicated what he did, in the sense that he shouldn't have been excommunicated. And I think, and I know it's going to cause some people's heads to explode, I think one day he'll probably be canonized as a saint. I don't think that day's anytime soon, but I think that's going to happen. So excommunication by itself does not mean that somebody's going to hell automatically. If they die excommunicated, they're definitely going to hell. We know that. I mean, St. Joan of Arc is the perfect example. That being said, it's not something to be taken lightly. If you know your actions could lead to your excommunication, you really, really should not do them unless you're absolutely sure the Lord is calling you to this. And I think it's a very important principle to say. And so, because the fact is that is probably where this will lead. If, for example, the Institute decided to simply ignore Cardinal Cupich's command, and they continue to say the Latin Mass there, I think it's very likely that those priests would probably be excommunicated, and also the institute itself worldwide, remember this is a worldwide institute, it's not just Chicago, would likely have been shut down. Would have been told they would have had to go the Lefebvre route, or they'd be shut down. Now they might end up getting shut down anyway. I mean, that's an argument I've heard, and I think it's a valid point. They might eventually get shut down anyway. That being said, they get shut down very quickly and almost definitely if they had defied Superge's order. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have defied it, or they should have. I'm just saying let's recognize the consequences before we start jumping on our keyboards and telling them what they should or shouldn't do. They have to really pray about this. They have to understand the complete situation, and they have to really understand it before they take any radical action like that. And so the thing is you might have noticed I haven't given an answer of what we're supposed to do to respond. That's because I don't have an answer, because I do think everybody's in a different situation, and everybody needs to decide for themselves. They need to consider all the options. They need to think to themselves, okay, what do I need to do to keep my faith, to keep my kids' faith? What can I do? How do I perceive the obedience that is given to me? What level of obedience do I need to give to these commands? Do I believe they are just commands? Do I believe that a bishop is able to do this? Now, here's the thing. I have talked to faithful Catholics, solid Catholics who know their theology. Some have said a priest can absolutely positively disobey these commands from their bishop. Others have said, no, they cannot, that the bishop really does have a right to do this. And I'm telling you, these are on both sides are solid, good Catholics who know their theology, who are traditional, and they disagree on this. And so that's why I'm not willing to come down on one side and just say simply, okay, this is the right thing to do. All priests have to do this. I think a priest really has to discern for themselves, and lay people discern for themselves. I will say this, though. I do think the lay people should not just take this quietly. I do think lay people should be making a stink about this. We should be making it very clear to our bishops that this is not acceptable. I think this involves a number of things. For example, don't give a dime to them. Do not give a dime to Cardinal Gregory. If that means that's going to harm your own parish, at this point, I don't care. I don't think Cardinal Gregory should get one dime from the lay faithful. Same with Cardinal Supich and other bishops who are going to these extremes. So I think obviously at the pocketbook, especially if you're a wealthy Catholic who cares about the future of church, don't be supporting these actions. So don't do that. Also, public protest I think is fine. Public protest of these bishops wherever they go. Don't let them know what's going on. I think that's fine. I'm not saying everybody has to do this. I'm just simply saying that I think that's a legitimate way to respond. Make it very clear that what is going on is terrible. Do not be silent about this. I mean, I understand priests, they have a different situation. They might not be able to speak up as loudly as the lay people are, but lay people can't speak up about it. And I think we should, and absolutely we should. I also want to say this. I think this is a very emotional time for a lot of Catholics because, like I said at the beginning, this impacts them personally. And so people are going to be emotional. And so let's not fight each other. Let's not attack other Catholics who maybe make a different decision. So, for example, if your parish is getting shut down and some Catholics are doing one thing and other Catholics doing others, don't attack each other. Don't attack each other. People have to decide for themselves. And there's prudential judgments here. There's a lot of different moving pieces here. So let's not attack each other. Understand that the real evil here is the evil of these masses being shut down. That's the real evil. That's what needs to be resisted. We shouldn't be resisting each other when we make different decisions of what to do. We need to make decisions. We need to resist those who are making these evil decisions. That's the most important thing here is we have to come together. We have to be united and not attack each other. And finally, I started with an appeal to Catholics who do not attend church at Mass. I want to make a final appeal to them. Please be sympathetic to those who are really emotionally hurt by these actions. I get that you might not get it. I get that you might not really understand why it's such a big deal to some people, but it is a big deal. And it's a core part of what they believe, how they follow Jesus Christ. And I think we should be supportive of that. It's not like they're saying, I want to follow Jesus Christ by being a Lutheran. obviously we can have a problem with that. They're saying, I want to follow Jesus Christ as millions of Catholics and saints have over 1,000 years. We cannot have a problem with that as Catholics. We might not decide, that might not be what we're doing, but we can't have a problem with Catholics who do that. So please understand this. I saw some Catholics who don't attend church, not mass, are like, well, these traditionalists are reaping what they sow. These traditionalists, they just, reap what they sow. And I think that's just an awful attitude to have. Please be understanding. Please let your bishops know that you don't want this to happen in your diocese, and let them know you don't attend the traditional Latin Mass, but you don't want this to happen, that you understand the traditional Latin Mass is a good thing in the church, and it's not something that we should go against. And so please urge your bishops to do that. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Again, prayer and fasting. Pray for our bishops, pray for the Pope, pray for those who are directly impacted by these decisions. I know some in the comments don't think necessarily this is going to spread further. I pray you are right. I just know I've heard things that this is going to continue to spread. I hope that what I've heard is wrong and that this won't happen, but I fear that it will. So let's continue to pray for each other. Let's not attack each other. Let's really instead work to pray for our bishops and urge them not to do these terrible things that they're doing right now to shut down the traditional Latin Mass. Okay, well, that's it for now, everybody. Until next time, God love you.